This is a very important conversation. Like you have said, now the policy focus is changing and we are looking at import substitution as an alternative. And when you talk about import substitution, then industrial development becomes very, very important because when you look at most of the products that we have constantly been importing, they are mostly industrialized products that have been manufactured or processed into more finished products. And but one of the challenges when it comes to manufacturing or processing, because manufacturing is actually the higher level of processing. There's the light processing, and a lot of our small and medium enterprises are actually involved in the light processing. And one of the biggest challenges that they face in trying to enter into the different markets, whether it's at the domestic or at the regional level or at the international level, is standards. Because every product has a specification in terms of the standard that it should meet, but also every market has certain specifications of certain standards. And certain standards will vary from place to place and product to product. And so that's why it's very important for anyone interested in getting into processing of any kind or manufacturing to take the issue of standards into consideration, because you can have a beautiful product, but if it's not meeting the standard, then you will not be able to reach the market. Exactly.
Which could be quite unfortunate because you already incurred costs in production and expected that you're going to have returns from it. But we are fortunate in Uganda, we have actually the Uganda Bureau of Standards that is specifically overseeing the whole process and making sure that all products in Uganda, be it agro, be it pharmaceuticals, be it whatever case, they meet the standards. What is their position in this, and have they taken us as far as we need?
Thank you very much for that question. The Uganda National Bureau of Standards has made a lot of effort to put in place a number of standards. And one of the things that they constantly encourage is that if you realize that there's a product that you're trying to produce and that particular standard is not there, you need to engage them so that they actually develop that standard. So in terms of putting in place standards, a number of standards have been put in place. However, the challenge that we have seen is that the individuals who are supposed to benefit from these standards are actually not benefiting, or they are not actually, and it's because they are not meeting them. So, for example, when we talk about standards, the people who are often confronted and held accountable, the people who are doing the processing. So people at the last stage of production. So for example, if you're making soap, it's that person who is putting the bars, who is putting all these different chemicals together to eventually make the soap. Or if you're talking about, say, baby porridge, all these different products that are put together to make the baby porridge, the whole milling process, etc., etc. Exactly, but there are those individuals at the back, say for example the farmers, the transporters, who are also supposed to be aware and complying to the different standards, who are actually not doing so. And these eventually, the absence of their compliance to the standards they're supposed to be complying to then affects the final product of this particular producer. So for example, if you're making, I'll use the same example of baby porridge. If for example you're putting in millet, you're putting in maize flour, so you're putting in soya, nkeje, etc., etc. Whoever you're buying from should also be meeting a certain standard. So for example, if they are drying their maize on bare ground.
So it is actually impossible for us to talk about standards and leave out the on-farm and off-farm
Exactly,
activities.
exactly. Now, those different individuals also have to ensure that they are meeting those different standards, because it affects The cost, because if you're buying from individuals who are not meeting the standard, then you as the user, you'll have to prepare this product to a certain level where it does not affect your final product. So that's one of the things that we have seen that is not really being paid attention to. And we saw this actually when we had a project that we were implementing in Nakaseke and Lira, where we and Masindi, Nakaseke, Masindi and Lira, where we realized that the farmers, but also the transporters themselves and the traders had no idea that there were certain specific standards that they were supposed to meet, for example, around maize. And through that particular engagement, when they were able to realize, they actually got into a process of putting in place an ordinance at the district level, and enforcement then improved. So one of the things that we think needs to happen is for UNBS to get to that level of ensuring that accountability for compliance is required even at that level, and not just when it comes to the entrepreneurs who are trying to add value.
So at the moment, UNBS looks at standards of this manufacturer from the factory, that is, and leaving alone the farmer maybe who's distributing the maize, maybe the farmer who's distributing the milk for milk processors and the like. What should be done to actually extend those facilities? Should UNBS be capacitated enough, or there's no regulation to that?
I think one of the things that UNBS really struggles with is the issue of capacity. They have not been effectively financed. So even when you find that they have made effort to decentralize, so for example, you find that in Gulu, in Bale, they have made effort to put those regional offices. Again, they are not fully facilitated to be able to get to the micro producers. And in this case, I'm looking at the farmers. And so that is something that needs to be addressed. And that is why one of the proposals that we have constantly been making when it comes to allocations for the Ministry of Trade is that allocations should be increased for the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, because then they can be able to better provide their service, because their service is not just for trade, but it's also for health. Because if the product is rejected in a particular market, then it will quickly and easily come back into the domestic market. And most of us are not even aware that if you're looking at a specific product, it should not be in a certain way. So for example, how do you identify that groundnuts have aflatoxins? Yeah. So if you're not paying attention to that detail, because you're not aware about that detail, then you will consume a product which is not safe. Which will
in the end be harmful. Yes. Let's talk about the indicators of a good, of standards in a particular product, and feel free to actually cut across the agro process and the different products. Let's talk about the indicators. Could it be packaging? Could it be maybe branding? What are some of the indicators that maybe we can share with the manufacturers today?
So like I said at the beginning, standards vary. Some standards are product standards, some standards could be market standards. So for example, when you consider the case of maize, maize has a standard regarding moisture content, how much moisture is in a maize grain, because that then affects or will contribute to how quickly or how easily it will produce aflatoxins. Oh. Yes. So if there's a lot of moisture content, and usually the percentage is 13%, Actually at the farm level, there are certain people who have a traditional method of gauging whether a maize grain is dry enough or not. So usually they bite on it, and there's that feeling that they can tell that just by biting on it, this is enough, this is safe. So the moisture content of, and this applies to mainly grains, because if the moisture content of a product is very high, then it can easily grow aflatoxins on it, and aflatoxins, if consumed by human beings, can result into cancer. But also they are like you have said about packaging, and packaging usually is related to the market standards. Because, for example, you realize that in countries like Rwanda, they do not allow you to export products that are packed in polythene.
Bags, yes.
But also they also sometimes do not allow importation of certain products that are packed in plastic, so plastic bottles, and so they will insist that you should pack them in either boxes, paper boxes, or that you pack them in glass bottles. But also when you look at, for example, products that are packed hot, if you're packing a product and the product is supposed to be packed hot, usually if you pack it in a plastic bottle, its shelf life will reduce. So it affects the shelf life of a product. But then, so usually they encourage, if you're packing a product hot, you should put it in a glass bottle, because even when you, for example, you want to export it, the amount of time, if say it's going to take about 2 to 6 months, if you pack it in a plastic bottle, it could last, say, up to 6 months on the shelf, and then will get spoiled. But if you pack it in a glass bottle, it could go up to 2 years. And the example I'm giving is from Chile, because from some of the entrepreneurs that we have interacted with, who have been processing and packing chili sauce, those are some of the things that they have shared with us. And one of the things that we see is that there's a lot of learning that happens. So for you to reduce on your cost of production, it's important to do as much research. And so the issue of trying to comply with standards goes beyond just your interaction with UNBS and trying to meet that particular standard, because there are also all those other nitty-gritties that you need to understand. How long do I want my product to be on a shelf? Which market do I want to target, so and so on and so forth.
While talking about standards, we should differentiate the different markets, because while I'm producing maybe a baby powder, it could be in maybe a plastic bottle, and that could pass for example, the Ugandan market or the East African market, but it could not pass for Nigeria's market or even the European market. Should we discuss what particular market, what particular standard is required?
Yes, I think that's very important also, because and one of the things that exporters do is to also understand, okay, if my product has passed the UNBS standard, what are the requirements in the other market? It's very important, because you start a process of getting your products to be exported, and then you get to a point and you can't proceed because you're not meeting the other standard. So it's very important to know what are the requirements on the other side.
All right. Okay, taking you away from that, let's look at the factory standards, the processing, the refining, the distilling for the juices and all. And we're talking about now costs of production, where maybe for me to continue drying this maize so that it doesn't have a lot of moisture to develop aflatoxins, I need electricity. I need more electricity than usual. So does the cost of production have a seat in this talk? Because I believe, in my own personal point of view, it is going to be high if I'm going to meet the standards of a particular market. Now, in your experience, how do we deliberate around the cost of production and meeting standards?
The cost of production is actually one of the biggest hindrances to a lot of entrepreneurs being able to access markets, but also in terms of, before we talk about accessing, to be able to comply. And when I speak about entrepreneurs, I want to focus a lot on the small and medium enterprises, because they are the ones who actually face these challenges. Because when you look at the large entrepreneurs, for them they come with a lot of investment capital. And so, for example, you look at a Chinese entrepreneur and they are coming in with a loan that has been given to them by their government at 0% interest rate. So the situation is totally different. That's why I like to focus a lot on the small entrepreneurs. And one of the challenges that they face is that, you see, if the cost, how much it will cost you to get, say, your product certified, depends on how many parameters your products contain. So, for example, if your product contains up to 8 parameters, it means you have to pay for each of those parameters to be tested. And then in the testing, then once they are tested, and then they can be able to tell you, okay, whether this particular parameter you need to increase on the amount, or you need to reduce if you're to meet the specific standard. So then the conversation completely changes. And you find that, for example, one of the things that we know is that for each parameter to be tested, you need about 250,000. So if you have 4 parameters, that's 1 million Uganda shillings. And then there is the process of auditing, what they call auditing. So they come to your facility, they check it out and see whether, for example, where you work is flat enough, because there are certain products where you require a completely flat surface.
Flat ground,
yes. So if the audit is done and you're not meeting those particular standards, then you have to make arrangements to actually meet them. So the costs go beyond just what UNBS will highlight out for you. And so for example, there's an entrepreneur who we've been engaging with, and one of the things that she makes baby porridge. The company makes baby porridge, and one of the things that they are currently doing is looking for money to be able to build a concrete backyard, okay. front and backyard. So that, because then that's one of the requirements that was highlighted for them when it came to the audit process.
But that needs money.
And that needs money. Exactly. So that's why one of the things that we have been saying is that if government is looking at supporting access to finance for entrepreneurs, they need to look at some of those different nitty-gritties, because if an entrepreneur is looking for investment capital to add into their business, they could be looking for investment capital to undertake an investment like that. And so then the conversation of how much the interest rate will be required for when this particular loan is awarded to this entrepreneur is different from if I am saying, say, I want to buy a machinery to increase my production. Yes.
All right. I beg to put a pause on that, and we'll pick up from that particular point of the whole talk on the cost of production, especially when it comes to meeting some of these standards. UNBS has its own money that is paid to them, and of course, even as a manufacturer goes ahead to add some value on their produces, they meet a certain cost as well. We embark on the talk after these messages.
Smart 24. Smart Business. Chili farmers target 80% of international market because it is less consumable on our local market.
Ebbeeyi yaabwo teri up and down, tebawunsinga. Era we bouncing omanya, deyo weegwa obeera informed before harvesting. Ebintu ebisasinze tumenya leero. Era gavumenti erina okukola ekyalina omulimu munene nnyo gw'otukolera ku bintu ebyaffe bano bye tutunda. Nti byo bigwa nnyo akatale.
There are few factors that when they are put together and put properly, we could be the basket of all these vegetables that we are buying to those countries that requires them than us. Because Uganda, by nature, by God, God gave us everything.
This week on Thursday, we are discussing chili farming and the reason why it is much consumed on international market.
Life's most important memories are made together. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, and funerals. Yet we find our lives in a time where staying healthy means staying at a distance. Smart24 TV would like to thank you for doing your part to help flatten the curve of the coronavirus by staying home and missing out on important milestones. By staying home and social distancing, you are ensuring better care for our community. Without these sacrifices, our health system would not be able to treat everyone who would be affected by this virus. By social distancing now, you are ensuring that there will be more of those cherished memories to make later. We can't wait to celebrate them with you. For our Ministry of Health members and all health service providers who cannot stay home for our safety, we are shoulder to shoulder with you on the front lines every day. There are no words to thank you for your daily commitment to service and sacrifice for others. For everyone at home, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. By staying home, you are doing your part to save lives. We cannot do without you.
Smart 24. Smart Business.
Welcome back from that break, and of course thank you for staying with us here on Smart 24 TV. Before we went for the break, I was still here with Faith Lumonya from SEATINI, and we're discussing issues around manufacturers, issues around standards of products that are manufactured or produced here locally, how best we can actually look at them penetrating through the different markets, and of course staying there and not being rejected like we've been seeing the norm previously. Now Faith, please feel free to educate me on this. When we talk about standards of a product, does that go in line with value addition? Is there a role for value addition in promoting or improving the standards of a particular product?
One of the things about standards is that every time you add certain value to a product, it attracts specific standard requirements. So for example, like the example I gave of maize, once you get it from the garden, there's the drying process. And the drying process has specific standards that, for example, when you're drying, you should not dry the maize on the ground. You should ensure that animals are not playing in the maize as it's being dried. But that also you should be drying it in an open space so that things don't fall into the maize, because then it creates additional work that you have to sort it out, etc. So those are the standards at that level. Now at that level you're trying to add that particular value, because if you're getting the maize from the garden and you're just selling it directly,
There's no value added.
you're not adding any specific value. But if you're drying it, then you're adding that value of having it dried. And then there is when you get it and take it to the machine for milling into posho or into animal feed. Now that also requires a certain standards. And one of the things that a lot of us know is that even when it comes to the milling machine, it should be a certain standard. It should be a food grade machine.
Yes.
It should be stainless steel. But in many of our markets and in many of the milling factories out there, they have refabricated machinery here and there, and they are not really meeting the food grade standard. So that also creates a challenge. But so that's the standard at that level. And then there's the whole packaging process. It also will attract another standard requirement. So the higher you go in the value addition process, in the manufacturing process, the higher the number of standards requirements. Yes.
I needed to ask that question because it makes a lot of rounds, especially when even the president himself keeps telling people to add some value on a particular product, because then they're actually creating a wider market for it. They're creating alternatives for themselves as an entrepreneur, and there are high chances that the market base there, right, is actually one that we cannot.
But also they are increasing the if I may use the word, lifespan or the shelf life of the product, because if you're getting maize from the garden and it's still on the cob and it's not dried, if you're putting it on a shelf to sell it, it will soon wither. But if you're milling it into posho, into porridge, its shelf life increases.
Before we went to the break, you were still telling me about how a lot of cost implications are particularly in this matter, and we still find high rates of maybe borrowing the money. Now I want to understand, where is government positioning itself, or where do you recommend government positions itself, even as they recommend to the manufacturers to add value to their products, even as we recommend and tell people how their products are being rejected in markets. We should be able as a state to stand with them in any particular form. What is your recommendation?
Well, so one of the things that we have seen, and we want to applaud government for it, and also indirectly thank COVID and the lockdown, because we have constantly been saying, government, please allocate money for small and medium entrepreneurs in UDB, in UDC, increase the allocation to microfinance center, make it easier for entrepreneurs to access this money, lower the interest rates, reduce on the requirements, etc., etc., and it was not really forthcoming. And constantly we saw that it's the large entrepreneurs who are constantly benefiting from this money. But we hope that now with the whole post-COVID economic recovery and growth strategy, that more small entrepreneurs will be able to access this money. And you ask what are the recommendations, and I think for me one of the things I would want to see is governments understanding what entrepreneurs go through, because when you understand what an entrepreneur goes through, then you will understand the financial needs, and you will treat these financial needs in a specific way. So like I said, those different requirements. So for example, you have to build a concrete platform, you have to provide specific garments for your workers, you have to take your workers through specific tests so that you can be able to effectively comply with the different standards and have a safe product. All those are operational costs, production costs, that if entrepreneurs were supported with finance, they would be able, the burden on them would be able to reduce. So that's one of the recommendations for government to be able to engage with these entrepreneurs. Another thing that we have been proposing is that government needs to provide a fair ground when it comes to tax incentives. A lot of large entrepreneurs are enjoying tax holidays. Yeah. And so, for example, you see companies like Bidco that have been benefiting from a tax incentive of up to 25 years.
Yes, you want to think they have some money spared.
Exactly. And then you see entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs that have a lot of potential to create employment, because when you actually considering statistics in terms of employment, small entrepreneurs employ up to 2.5 million Ugandans. And in terms of the private sector composition, they comprise 90% of the entire private sector. So these are the guys who should actually be benefiting from tax incentives. But the tax incentive structure has been designed in such a way that it is either the minister or the president or the or you are a commissioner general who will decide who gets an incentive, and that becomes very problematic for a small entrepreneur. And for example, there is an entrepreneur in Masindi who employs about 100 people, but they have been operating on a generator for a very long time, and the amount of money they spend per month running on a generator is 10 million Uganda shillings per month. And they've been making attempts to import solar panels so that they can shift and they can shift and reduce that cost to using solar panels, but they have faced challenges in terms of being able to access some kind of relief in terms of the taxes when they are importing these particular panels. But also these same guys export up to 80% of what they produce. And the Income Tax Act is very clear when it comes to that incentive, that if you're exporting at least 80% of what you produce, you're entitled to an income tax exemption. But such entrepreneurs are not benefiting from these exemptions. So, and no one has actually even reached out to them to say, okay, how do we assist you benefit from this incentive? Because if you helped them to access that incentive, you imagine they would employ more people, but also they would increase on the number of farmers they are buying from for their inputs.
Okay, all right. Usually when we talk about this particular topic, standards of particular products, I feel like we tend to segregate or even show a division right there, and probably talk about products or standards of products that we sell outside, leaving alone those ones that we consume locally. Are we making ourselves susceptible to substandard products, all in the name of leaving the best ones for the international market or markets outside?
Yes, and what you say is something that a lot of us always raise, but it's not that the domestic market is comfortable consuming substandard products. But like for the example I gave, if you are going to export a product, it's going to say take 2 weeks on the market, in transit from here, Uganda, to Europe, or whichever place it may be. That amount of time alone will change the product taste, or the product, the composition, but basically, yeah, the taste, the standard, etc., etc. So that is why some of those markets demand very high standards. Because, for example, when you look at the European Union market in 2018, 2019, they banned us, Uganda, from exporting fruits and certain vegetables. And one of those products that was really affected was the chili, because we export a lot of our chili, the unprocessed chili, to Europe, and they found that our products had high concentration of pesticide residues, but also that they had pests. So, for example, there were small worms in them, and so if you're looking at a product, say for example, if we are considering the pepper, if you're exporting that pepper and it has a small worm in it, the amount of time it takes to leave Uganda and then reach Europe is long enough for this particular worm to lay eggs and have more worms hatched. So that is why they demand very, very high standards to avoid such circumstances. But now, like for the sake, if it's here, even if it's a single worm and you have bought it from the market, you pull it out and the effect won't be as much. But if it's traveling that length and the worms increase in number, then they completely destroy the product, but also they lower its standard, basically. Yeah. And then the other example I gave of products packed hot in plastic versus products packed hot in glass. The shelf life for glass is longer. So ideally, such markets would demand that you pack that particular product in a glass, so that when it gets the other side, it does not only make business sense for the person buying the product from you and having it imported in that particular market, because then they have a longer time to sell their product, but also it allows them to be able to sell for a longer time. Yeah, so it makes more sense in terms of business, but also in terms of safety, that the product reaches and it's safe and available for everyone to consume.
All right, as we head towards a winding up, I believe there's still some mediation to come to agreement with. But in my own point of view, I would believe that even though there are trainings to be conducted in this particular line of sensitization, or even technological advancements, don't you think it is wise that these ones, they be enrolled right from the distributors of raw materials, let them be farmers or the like, up to the manufacturer, up to the middlemen in the transportation, up to when they reach the market?
Yes, exactly. And that is what we are constantly saying, and we are encouraging UNBS to partner not only with non-state actors but also with the district authorities, the local government, especially the district agriculture officers, district production officers who engage with these micro producers, the small scale farmers. But also the UNBS needs to work very closely with the Uganda Export Promotion Board, because the Export Promotion Board knows the different standards that are required in these different export markets. And so if they can be able to harmonize their service, their engagement, and ensure that, for example, if I'm an exporter, the standard given to me by UNBS should be a standard that will allow me to be able to export in any of those export markets. But also another thing that we are calling on government is to support entrepreneurs, either through tax incentives or through finance, so that they can be able to effectively meet these standards and benefit from the different markets. But also, even when it comes to for example, issues to do with packaging, the government needs to reduce or completely remove, for example, import duty on glass and boxes, because I mean, like I've clearly indicated about the benefits of glass packaging for certain products. It's important that some of these taxes are reduced, because if those taxes are removed, then and we are increasing export, we are earning, and that the amount of money we earn will still come back.